So Entityform. I'm Wayne. I don't think I introduced myself to YouTube. All right. Yeah. Okay. So all right. So what does Entityform do? So it allows you to. It's a module that allows you to create customizable forms. The simplest of which would be like a contact us form. You can also do surveys or other sort of other similar forms with it. So the module it's most similar to is the web form module. A lot of people have used the web form module before, I assume. So the question is, why would you use Entityform? So if you look at the use statistics for Entityform versus web form, since they do sort of serve the same goal, Entityform is a lot less popular than web form by order of magnitude at least. So so why would you choose it? That's what I'm going to sort of cover in this talk. So first, some of the reason, yeah. So if you just go on the popularity, you'd choose web form. But some of the reasons those numbers are so different is web form's been around a really long time. So the earliest version I could find was for 4.4, and I don't know if any previous versions of Drupal are even still on Drupal.org, so it's possible it existed even before that, but it's been around since 2005. The first stable release was 4.7, and oddly enough, there's still over 700 reported installs of the Drupal 5 version of web form out there. So, and unfortunately, they don't report the 4.7 installs, but I'm sure there's probably some of those as well. And web form is up to the 4X series, so it's been sort of rewritten 4 times. Entityform is much, much newer. So the first version was released in the end of 2011, and the first stable release wasn't until 2012. And it's gone through one sort of major revision, so it's on the 2X series. So it's much newer. That's probably the predominant reason that it's. But for the lack of popularity, everybody knows web form. It's been around for ages. But the two modules are actually really quite different under the hood, even though they solve the same goal in how do I build a simple form. So Entityform, all the submissions are Drupal entities, which I'll talk a little bit about when we get into the demo. But the entity system for Drupal 7, all your users, nodes, comments, anything else in the system are entities for the most part. And so Entityform submissions are also entities, which is not true of web form. Web form sort of has its own, it's off on its own. It's not necessarily doing things in the Drupal entity way. It uses, Entityform uses the standard Drupal field system. So if you create custom content types and add fields to them or add fields to a user, Entityform works exactly the same way. So versus web form, which has its own field system, it mirrors many of the features of the other one, but it's not the standard Drupal field system. It's kind of its own thing that it built, again, way back in the Drupal 4.7 days or something, and that it has just sort of continued with up to this point. So because it uses Entityform, because Entityform uses standard entities and fields, you get a lot of out-of-the-box integration. It just sort of works with other Drupal stuff that, like rules and views, which I'll show in a bit here. And you can also use any sort of standard Drupal hooks. So like if you're writing code, you can hook into entity insert, entity update, entity delete. Now web form has some parallel hooks, but again, it's, they've got their own set. It's not like the other stuff that everything else uses in Drupal, or most other things in Drupal use. And another difference is that because it uses a standard field system, the data for the form submissions is stored differently in the database, and that has some repercussions as far as really big forms. So I'll come back to that at the end. All right, so let's just do a demo. So simple demo. Let's do a contact us form. So we'll turn on Entityform module. And I can't see this button. Yeah, I can see the, oh, there's. All right, so Entityform requires the Entity API, views, and some other dependencies. And so Entityform is different than WebForm in that WebForm creates a node type, or you can set up a node type to, and then when you would go make a new form, you'd go to add content, and you would add one of type WebForm. Entity forms are defined sort of at the system level, so they're here under the structure, Entityform types. And so creating an Entityform type is similar to how you would create like a new content type. So here, you can create a contact us. You can choose a redirect path, like if you wanted to go to a particular page after you submit the form, so we can go to the front page. And you can access settings. These are like who's allowed to submit the form, so we can allow both logged in users and not logged in users to submit the form. We can do a preview page. I'll save that for the next demo. The submission views, this allows you to override the listing of submissions. I'm going to leave that alone and we'll just take the defaults. Entityform has built-in draft capability. If you want people to be able to save a draft of a form before they submit it, that doesn't make sense in a contact us for a contact us form, but it might make sense for other types of forms, like if somebody's saving a survey or some other sort of quiz or test or something, and then they're not sure they want to submit it yet. You can turn that on and it's built in. Okay, we can provide a menu link. So this is similar to like when you create a node or something. So we can say contact us and stick that on the main menu. URL path settings. So we can, this is again similar to a node, we can put in a path setting. And form overrides allows me to set submit button text or override some of these things. The only thing here maybe is like, maybe I'll call the submit button send. But there's some other things here as far as like the confirmation message that shows up at the top and whether or not, and the other messages that might show up. All right, when you create the entity form, then you get thrown into this, the field interface. So if you've made a custom content type before, this should look familiar. It's basically the same. You have access to sort of all the standard field types. So we can create a contact form, name, make it a required field. And we can make this a long text for the message. All right, so now we've set up the form. We can get a preview of it over here. And then if we go back to the home page, here it is. I told it to put it on the main menu, so it shows up here. And we can submit the form. All right, and it saves and kicks me back to the front page, which is what I told it to do. If we want to view the submission, we can go up under Structure again, Entityform Types. And on this row where it says Contact Us, we can view the submission here. And we have some options we can view the submission individually. Or we can view a table, which the table will sort of put the put the contents out here in separate columns. Obviously, that's not a great idea if you have like a million fields, but works okay for this. Now, one thing with our contact form is I set this up as a text field, so there's nothing actually to validate this email, so I can actually just like put anything I want in here, even if it's not a valid email, and it'll take it. So if I wanted to validate this as an email, remember this uses the standard Drupal field system, so there is an email module that provides an email field. So if you enable the email module, then come back over here, we can delete that, we'll delete the existing email field and we'll replace it. Oops. With an email type field, and that's pretty much all we have to do. That'll automatically validate that somebody puts in something that could be an email address. Doesn't validate that it's a real working address, but that it's valid by its syntax. So now if I try to put something that's not an email address in there, then I get an error message. If you want to set up notifications, there's a separate module for that. And notifications for Entityform are all driven by the rules module. So if you've used that before, you can go in there. It's got sort of a simplified interface for it, which we'll see, but you have the full capability of the rule system to do all sorts of advanced stuff, which I'll show in the next demo. But so to do a simple one, you just turn on Entityform notifications. There's a bunch of dependencies for this, which I've already downloaded on this system, but find the dependencies, download them. And then if we go back over here to the Entityform types, there's not a link for it. It's sort of semi-hidden. If you click Edit, there's a new tab, Rules, up here. So you click the Rules tab, and then you can add an admin email notification or an email submitter. Sorry, I know that's kind of small, but email submitter notification. So for a contact form, I probably wouldn't do one back to the person who submitted it. And yeah, I don't know what these errors are about. They don't seem to cause any problem. And so when I add one of those, then I can put in a subject like a body, which you can say like, and then there's a show submission will include the contents of the submission, and then who you want to send it to. You can send it to me. All right, now if we go back and do this. Did get one. Let me see if I can get it dragged over there. Oh, for some reason it won't drag. Oh, because that's full screen. Yeah, so then I got my email here. Whoops. Sorry, I lost my other window. Oh, okay. All right, so that's the simple demo. But now let's, all of that stuff, frankly, if that's what you have to do, like it's pretty easy to do that with web form. And, you know, it wouldn't be a big deal to do it with web form if you wanted to, because it's a little more complex with the Entityform to get it set up. And you can see it was a little rough. There's some error messages thrown out that I don't think mean anything. So, but let's look at something more advanced, something that would be much more difficult to do with web form. Not possible, but more difficult. So in this advanced example, we're going to create a room booking system where you can book rooms and order food service for meetings sort of by submitting this form. And so I've already done a little bit of the work. I've created a couple content types. One for rooms that has some a few fields like the name. It has an image, capacity, and some setup and takedown time required for those rooms so that people don't book them too close together. And then for food service, I've created a couple food service options that you can order for your. Yeah, but like I said, both of those are just content types here. So nothing too special there. All right, so let's make a this registration form or sign up form. So we will start by turning on, if I can find it, Entityforms. I'm going to go ahead and turn on Entityform notifications. We're going to need that eventually. So. Okay. So we'll add a reservation form, and we'll have a redirect. I think that one page was the rooms page. Okay, we'll for this we'll only allow like authenticated users to use it, because maybe this is going to be on your intranet or something where people are signing up in-house. So we will do a preview page this time. We'll leave the submissions view. Draftable is probably not necessary here. We'll put a menu link. And we can give it a path, and we'll leave we don't need to override any of the buttons or anything. We'll just leave those at the defaults. Okay, so now we're going to need to set up a few fields for this. Now I've installed several additional field types on this site, so let me just point them out. I installed the date module because we're going to need some way that people can sign up for, tell me when, time, and day that you want to sign up for the room. I've also installed the entity reference module because I need a way that people can specify which room and which food services that they want to register, they want to reserve. So with those, what I can do is I'll make a name field. It's just a text box. Who's reserving it? We'll need a date field for when you want it. And so, yeah, we'll go down to hour and minute. We'll collect an end date so that we know when you're done with it. We'll make that required. So we're going to need two entity reference fields here, one for the room that you want to sign up for and one for the food services you want. So we'll have room, entity reference. We'll make it a select list because there's only a few of them. So we'll make this. So this entity reference allows you to select some other entity and link it into this submission if you haven't used entity reference before. So let's see, we might need that too in the future. Well, actually, I'll leave it off now. I'll come back. All right, so we'll set up one entity reference for the room And for food services, we're actually going to allow you to sign up for more than one at a time. So maybe you want coffee and donuts. So again, it's going to be an entity reference, but this time I will use autocomplete just for variety and because I want to do more than one. So this will be for a food service node. Won't be required. And let's see. Oh. All right, so I think that's all we need for that. So now if I go back to the home page, I thought that I had put, oh, it's on the wrong, it needs to be on the main menu. Here we go. Okay, so now I have this reserve a room link and I can click it. Probably should have picked different defaults for that date field because obviously I don't want to be able to reserve it right this second, but I'll put in my name and then we can like reserve it for Wednesday. And we'll say from 9:30 to 11:30. The room I want, I'll take the conference room with, whoops, messed up on the food services one. Yeah, but I didn't make it a multi-field, so I made a mistake there. Let me run back here. So food services, if I edit this field, it needs to allow unlimited number of values. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I'll take the conference room and we'll get coffee and donuts. All right, now because if you remember I turned on the preview option, so this is what it does before I actually submit it. It shows me again exactly what I'm about to submit. I have a chance to go back and change it or submit it. So I'll go ahead and submit it. It redirects me back to here. All right. So again, if I want to see those submissions, I go under the structure, entity form types, and I can look at the submissions, view them individually, see exactly what's been signed up for. But I'm going to show you some other ways that we can generate notifications and have easier access to like when is this room signed up, because obviously looking through this table of submissions is going to be a pain after a while. So let's do notifications first. So the content type room has a field that you couldn't see on that other, you couldn't see it on the other form, or the view, the listing, but it has a notify email. So if I go under here and actually edit one of these, the notify email here is auditorium@ingenuity.com. And there could be more than one, potentially. And the conference room has a different one. Conference room@ingenuity.com. So maybe these would be in different buildings. Different people are in charge of it. For the food services, I didn't set up different notification email because typically if you're ordering food service, there's like one place you're going to get it from. So what I want to do for the notifications is this. Whatever room you sign up for, I want to send a notification to the email that corresponds to that room. And if you sign up for any food services, I want to send one notification, not multiple, one to the director of food services or whatever, to the food services address. And so that's what I'm going to show you how to do here. Okay, so under structure, entity form types, we'll go back here under edit and rules. Now, we're not going to be able to use the simple admin and or submitter rule sets that are up there already. we're going to need to create our own. So we can do that down here under add a new Entityform submission rule. And again, it throws these errors that don't seem to cause any problem though. So we want to add a new rule. We'll give this a name like email room manager. And you can take the defaults down here. So now what we need to do is set up, we need to set up the actions that will allow us to send the, whatever linked room it is, send to that email, send a notification to that email. So if you've ever used rules before, if you want to access a field, you have to check if that field exists, I think, first. Or actually, no, the first thing we need to do is see what. So in my conditions, I could have more than one entity form on the site. There might be the reservation form, but there might be some totally other forms too. So the first thing I should do is make sure that I've got the right. Oh, wait. No, I don't need to do that. Sorry. Let me back up. I don't need to check which type of entity form it is because that comes at a later step. So all I need to do here is let's see, check if I need to check if the I need to check if the entity, which in this case is the form submission, has the room field on it. Okay, this, and the only reason I have to check that, I know it is going to have it, but the only reason I have to check it is rules doesn't know, the rules module, this interface doesn't know that it's going to have it. And so if I don't do this check first, I won't have that option here. I won't be able to select. If you look here, there's no sort of, I won't be able to pull it up. So I've got to check that first. So first we'll check that the field room module, or sorry, field, exists on the entity form. And one more thing. I need to check that that email field exists on whatever is in the room, whatever the linked room is. So now you see, now I've got an option for field room here. So I can say, okay, whatever room they selected, make sure that that room has the field notify email. That's where I'm storing who is the manager. Now, those two things give me access to all the fields I need. So now down here in the actions, I set up that notify email as a multi-valued field. So it's possible there could be more than one person who needs to be notified because of this room usage. So I'm going to add a loop to loop through all of the people who are listed there, all the email addresses. So I'll add a loop, and then that loop will be over the entity, which is the form submission, field room. So now I'm on the room node, and then I'm going to loop through the notify email. And for each of the items in that email, I'm going to add an action to send mail. And this one works better if you switch it to data selector. So you can, the list item, the thing that I'm looping over, is the email address. So I want to, that is the to address. That's what's in that field. So the list item goes here for the to. The subject is whatever you want this, like reservation for. And there's some replacement patterns down here. So let's see, I think field room, yeah, field room should be here. So if I use that, it should give me a nice customized title for the email. And then I can say someone, or actually I can put their name in here, I think. Let's see, field name, yeah. Oops. this person reserved the room. Now notice this is actually, we're seeing one of the benefits of using Entityform right here is that I have access to sort of all the normal tokens that you would have if you're doing any kind of emails. This isn't nearly as well done with web form. You can get some things, but you can't get you can't drill down to the level that you can with this. And then the other thing that will be useful here is I should include the entire submission so that all the details. And that is available down here in the entity text export token. And there's actually a version that's already formatted for email. So I'll put that in the message as well. And I think everything else can be left at default. All right, so that should loop through and email everyone who's associated with the room I sign up for. So the next thing I need to do is, let's go back. Oh, wait, there's one more step here. Under rules for this particular form, there's still no active rules here, so I need to assign that rule to this form, and I do that up here. You can see now that I've added that, it's a new option under here. So I can add that, and now that's been assigned here. So let's make one more rule to email food services. So I'll go kind of quick here. Email food services. Now in this case, what I want to check is entity has field food services, and food services is not empty is what I need to check, because that's actually all I need to check is data value is empty, entity food services, but then I can choose negate. So if food services is not empty on this submission, then my conditions pass. So then my actions can be, and this part's actually simpler because I'm just going to send one email to like food services and what was the we'll include the full submission, which should include the room and everything else that was in the food that was selected. Oh, whoops, that's the wrong place. Okay, so for the subject and then for the message body, we'll put the actual submission in there.
I'm curious, subject is multi-line.
Yeah, I have no idea what happens if you do that. Well, it probably works. I just don't know what's going to come out, or what you're going to see. But
no, at least according to the email RFC, technically that should stuff additional headers.
Yeah, maybe.
It should be kind of interesting.
Okay, so now I need to do that one extra step. I need to assign the email food services to this form. Now, oops, I go back to the home page and reserve a room. All right, we'll pick the conference room, and we'll have coffee. Or actually, no, it's a lunch meeting, so let's have box lunch. Okay, and now if it worked, let me see. I've got my email over here. Hold on. Okay, so here's one of them. You can see it came to conference room as Ingenuity, so that was that was on the conference room since I specifically signed up, and it's got the full submission. And then the other one came in here to food services as Ingenuity. All right, so the notifications came out like we wanted. There's no other notifications, nothing up my sleeve. Yeah. I don't want some like, spam showing up on there, so I'm not putting my whole email up there. Okay, so that's our notifications. Next, because those Entityform submissions are Drupal entities, I said we can integrate them with views and rules and several other modules that are out in the Drupal space. So we have full views access to the submissions. Black boxes, but so what that allows us to do is like the calendar module for Drupal works through views, and normally people would set it up where you have nodes with dates on them, and then you can create a calendar of those. But you can actually do that for Entityform submissions as well. So I think, let's see if I do I already have calendar installed. Okay, so I've installed the calendar module for Drupal here already, and so the way you create a new calendar view is back up there. You go to the views interface and then you say add view from template. And then you have to find, and this is very confusing, but you have to find the right date field that you want to create the calendar on. So it's a calendar view of field date on Entityforms. That's the one I want. And we'll call it room calendar. All right, and you can see that right out of the box, it's showing 2 submissions that I made on the 29th and 30th. So we can clean these up a little bit so that they're, whoa. Sorry about that.
That was kind of nice.
Well, I can blow it up a little bit, probably. Well, the submission, it'll be for the submission, so it's probably going to be the ID. Because it's not going to be the title of the Entityform is in the type. So I'm assuming it's ID. All right, so we can add some of the, because, again, we're using standard Drupal forms, we can access all of those fields, because we're using standard Drupal fields, we have access to all those fields in here in views. So what did I have? I had like food services, the name that the person signed up with, and there's something else. Oh, I need the room. Is there anything else? I guess that's it. Okay, so we'll add those fields. We can make these links. See the name of the person who signed up. Oops. Not sure what that was. And let's see. I think let's just make sure the room thing is set correctly. We can make that one a link too. So now when we come down here, we have like all the information listed out there in the calendar view. Let me make a couple other. Let's put this, if I go to the parent menu item, let's put it on the main menu. Okay, so now I can come back here to room calendar, and I've got a sign up, basically a sign up the whole list of everyone who signed up. I can view it by week. Everything you can normally do with the calendar module, you now can do with those submissions. And you can also do things like you can, if you want to have a, again, because we have access to all the field data in a normal form, we can even create like exposed filters. So if we want to be able to filter by room, it's super easy. We just add the field room as an exposed filter. And right now it's going to make me type it in, which is not what I want to do. If I come back over here, by the way, just this is separate. This actually is not specifically the entity form, but if you have something like an entity reference and you want to make it a select box right here instead of this text box, if you go under the field settings, there's a checkbox for it. Under manage fields, if you edit the field down here, render views filter as select list. If you check that box, then it should. Oh, I'm gonna have to re-add it actually, I think, because it changed. Oh, no, I have to select one of these. There we go. Okay, then it'll work as a select box. Only a good idea if you have a small number, because obviously select box is gonna be huge if you've got hundreds of them or something. So now if we go back to the calendar, we can even filter it out and say, okay, well, show me the stuff in the auditorium. Now there's nothing in the auditorium because we didn't do any submissions there, but we can filter that out and get all that information. We can also do, because it's regular fields. And so just to compare this with WebForm, WebForm has views integration too, but it doesn't know a whole lot about the data that's in the field, so you don't get necessarily all the formatting options, and you definitely cannot do this, I think, which is because these are complete regular entity reference fields, we can even pull in data about the referenced entity. So the referenced entity, for example, in the field room, for example, we could pull in information about the room they selected, like maybe the picture of it. And we'll make it a thumbnail because it's going to be. Oh, whoops, this is the wrong place. Okay. Go to room. Right, and now we can pull in that data off of the reference entity as well, because we have full access to views here. All right. Oops. Okay. Features integration. So how many people have tried to capture a web form of features before? Yeah, and how well did it go? Mine never ever end up saying like they're just constantly like overridden, even though they work, but they're constantly overridden. In order to, so the features module, does everyone here know what features module is? You know what features module?
Not really.
Okay, so the features module allows you to take all this configuration that we did, like creating these entity form types and stuff. It lives in the database. And so if you want to push it to your production server, you need to export it and sort of import it on the other side. The features module allows you to export that configuration as a module, which then you can enable over here. And you can sort of do it repetitively if you're making changes. So in order to make WebForm work with features, you have to install the uuid module, which allows you to sort of export a node as configuration, to export this content as configuration. But Entityform is configuration. That's what it is already. So if you want to make a feature out of that, like let's say I wanted to package up this booking system and give it to you so you could run it on your site. All I would need to do is go in here to structure features, and pretty much everything works out of the box. So you would create a feature. Let's see, we're going to need food service and room content types. We're We're going to need our room reservation entity form type. I think this doesn't work right up here. Yeah, I don't think I need that. And I could probably have permissions related to those, but I'll just skip that for now. And then I'll need my views. So like my room calendar view and those other views I have for the rooms and the food service, I could include all those in there. And then, let's see. Oh, here. I need my rules configuration for emailing food services and the room manager. Give this a name. Oops, give it a name. A version. And there we go. I've just created a custom module for building like room booking.
In general, what's your name?
So usually I'll have some short prefix for the site, whatever the site is, the name of the site. I try to get it down to like 2 or 3 characters, and then I'll prefix everything related to that. Sometimes I'll use that same thing with an F after it if it's a feature versus a totally custom module that's for that one.
And then how do you import it back as a module? Or?
Yeah, so you could take that. So it downloaded a module. You would unpack it, and it's a regular module. You could install it just like a typical module, and all of these things that those content types, that form, it wouldn't have the menu links because I didn't export those, but that you can export those in there. Oh, that's true. Yeah, you're right. So all that would come out of the box.
That's awesome. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, and so, well, and what's nice is if you're doing this and then you've got, okay, so you launch the site and then you need to do it again. You make some change. The form has more fields now or something. You can come back here and do this again, like check it into Git or whatever, and push it up to the server and then apply just the changes with features. So that the production site mimics whatever your dev site is. All right, so the features integration definitely way better with Entityform than with WebForm. All right, some other things that work out of the box. Because we're using standard fields, we can use the field group module. So if you've ever used that, that allows you to create like groups of fields, which can be collapsible so that you can click them open. It also allows you to create vertical tabs and horizontal tabs. And it also allows for multi-page forms. So you can use that module with Entityform. You can use the field validation module. That module gives you a lot of advanced validation things like, well, you can do like regular expressions with it. I'm trying to remember what else you can do with it. There's a bunch of different sort of additional minimum and maximum length of something, number of characters and that kind of thing. You can do all those sort of things with field validation module. Gives you more options when you set up the fields. The field permissions module, you can limit certain fields to certain users. So for example, on this, if we wanted to create on our Entityform, we could go in here and create a field like approval. And it could be like unapproved, approved, rejected for options. And we could have the default be unapproved. And then we could set the field visibility so that only administrators can see this field. And if we did that, then I don't think I have another user account on here, but if we logged in with another user and they filled out the form, they wouldn't see that approval field. But then an administrator who looked at it could see that approval field, they could mark it approved, and then we could use that in our calendar view. So our calendar view could also be filtered to only show approved ones, and there's your workflow. So if you need to actually have people approve, we've already got the notifications going out to people, so as long as those people have the ability to approve them, then you've got sort of a whole workflow that you could do with it as well.
Do you recommend
So I haven't used it with multi-page forms. I know it's supposed to work, but I've used it for grouping and accordion kind of stuff, but I have not used it on multi-page. I don't know if there's another way to do a multi-page form with Entityform other than that, though.
For other just random one-off entities, field group multi-pages has been fine. At least in the use cases we were looking at it. But I don't see any reason why.
Yeah, I've definitely used it on nodes and it's been fine. On node forms. Yeah. Okay, so the field permissions module, field collection module. So if you have single fields that are actually two, like let's say those field. I'm not going to do a demo, but let's say you had those food services. If you wanted to say, coffee for 10 people or whatever, like you wanted to have both an integer value and this entity reference, but you wanted that as one sort of unit, so that you could say like coffee for 10 people, donuts for 20 people or something. I don't know. You could and have those. The field collection module allows you to build these compound fields. That works with Entityform. Conditional fields module. So this is something that WebForm has built into it. You can say if they select a certain value for this field, then show this other form element, so that you can pop open or close different ones. Or hide different ones based on what people select. You can do that with Entityform by using the conditional fields module, which that also works with nodes and everything else.
For what it's worth, that's jQuery, so that doesn't really work with multi-page, cross-page.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to know. And the big thing is that you've got hundreds of different field types. So WebForm does have a lot of field types. It's probably got like at least 15 or 20 different field types that it comes with. There are other modules you can get to add different ones to it. But again, WebForm is its own system. Doesn't use the same stuff like Drupal core uses. So it's more limited. There's hundreds of field types. There's like URL links, computed fields, address fields. Any module that provides a new field type can work with this for the most part, I think. Cool things that work because we're using Drupal entities. So I've already shown you views and rules and features. Other ones, well, actually we still token as well. So you can access like all the data values in rules, in emails that get sent by rules, etc. The flag module, if you're not familiar with that, allows you to sort of mark certain things as in some way. So you could actually use the flag module as a way to approve items too, where people could click a link and say mark it approved. The flag module could be used for that. Organic groups. So if you saw my organic groups talk, then you know that any entity can be a group type or a group content type. And so you can use that with Entityform as well. And I've actually, just in the last month and a half or so, built a module that actually does this in a more systematic way, integrates Entityform in organic groups. So I'll show you that real quick. On this site, I have 4 group nodes. So my group type is a node. And I have one Entityform type called contact us. And so what this OG Entityform module that I've written does is it allows you to submit Entityforms in a group context, and then people with group permissions to see the form submissions can see them for only their group. So the use case would be like you've got groups, maybe social network or something, where and you want to have every group should have like a contact form, but it should go to that whoever the leader of the group is. So that's what this does, and the setup is still a little quirky. That's why I'm not going to go through the install, but it does work once you get it set up. The main thing that you have to do to turn it on is under the Entityform settings, you check that you want this Entityform to behave as group content, and then these same sort of settings, which may be familiar to you if you've used organic groups or something else. So that's pretty much all you have to do to turn it on, and then it will create this Forms tab, which which you can hide, there are permissions for who can see the tab. And so this will list all of the forms which are available to be submitted in a group context. So the idea is that you would probably put some kind of link to this so that people don't have to click the Forms tab, but you need a way to get there for setting it up. So then you can submit this form in this group context to this one group. And then if I go back here under the group admin interface, there's a forms link as well. If I look at the submissions here, I can see that submission that I just made. But if I go back under some other group, then I can't see the submissions here. And that's all using the standard, because again, these entity forms are standard entities. It's using all the standard organic groups way to do that. There's not a whole lot of magic to it. The module basically just sort of auto installs a bunch of stuff. But it's got that same kind of groups audience field like you would get if you were using nodes for your group content. All right. So, summing up, when to use Entityform. When you want to use standard field types and you want to integrate with views, rules, or other Drupal modules. When you want to easily export to features, actually, I think earlier in this talk I said, oh, if it's just a contact us form, maybe you don't need to use Entityform. But actually, a contact us form is a perfect time to use Entityform because it's so easy, because it's actually something that should go with the site, like configuration to production or whatever. So I would use it strictly because of the features integration. And then if you want to implement complex notifications, it's very difficult to do those sort of notifications like we did with web form. I'm sure you can do it, and there is a conditional emailing thing built into web form, but it's not as powerful as rules. So when to use web form. So I'm not saying abandon web form. If you want to have a lot of different forms. Okay, so the web entity form, you got to have access to the admin interface in order to create new ones. So if you have end users, potentially like a lot of end users who need to create their own forms, then you should probably allow them to do, you should probably use web form for that, because you don't want everyone going to the admin interface, and you don't necessarily want them to see like all of the forms. So if you have a lot of different forms and a lot of different end users that might need to be sandboxed from each other, web form is probably a better choice for that, particularly if you don't need some of the other things, some of the views and stuff like in the rules. It's also really important if you have a form with a lot of fields. So the author of Entityform says 150 plus. I would probably stop before that. But like he says, if you have a form that has more than 150 fields, don't use Entityform. And the reason is, if you ever looked in the database, when you create a field on like a node, and it's the same is true for Entityform, there are two tables that get created for every field. And when you load like a node, it joins those tables in order to get the data. So imagine if you had a form that had 150 fields, your SQL statement that it's going to pull from the database is going to have like 150 joins in it, and the performance is not good. So the way web form works is different. Web form has a single table with all of the data in it, and so it can just like say, give me all the data for this form, and then it parses it out or formats it as a separate step. So web form is definitely a lot better for if you have a lot of fields, like a long survey or something. Web form also has built-in analysis tools. So if you're doing a survey and you want to see that like 50% of the people who submitted it picked this option and 42% picked this option, that comes out of the box with web form. You could probably do something with views to mimic that with Entityform, but it's built in with web form. There's a few more things. I think I hit the big ones, but this node link here has a full page thing with the whole when to use one versus the other and the advantages of each. All right, and that's it. Questions?
I have a question. It's like I'm not really familiar 8, but I know that like in Drupal 8, developers like already integrating a lot of features that in Drupal 7 you need to install as modules. Is there anything like web forms being integrated or in Drupal 8 or entity forms?
No.
Is
We
it
can
gonna
see,
be
I mean,
separate?
yeah, it'll still be separate. I don't know. Well, let me,
I mean, some modules are coming in, like Views is coming in.
Views is
Yeah,
coming
it's
in,
like
but
everybody installs Views anyway.
Yeah.
Not everybody installs web form. And there are actually some core, and it sounds a little silly, but there are some core modules that are getting pulled out in V8 and just going into the computer work. Like the blog module is gone.
Which one?
Blog.
So-
which makes sense because I don't know anybody that's ever turned it on and liked it.
yeah, so it looks like,
But-
it looks like there's not.
Exactly. It's so easy to just do your own.
I feel certain that this module will be ported to Drupal 8. It doesn't look like there's a ton of work happening on it now since the last update to the Drupal 8 version was 2013. But I feel pretty certain that this is going to be available for Drupal 8 in short order. And one thing that is, some of the field types have been brought in. So for example, the email field, not the link field that I mentioned, but the URL field. So there are some field types that are now part of core that you used to have to get a module. So those would be brought in, and of course you could use those when the Drupal 8 version of Entityform is out. And also the configuration management. So I showed features. There's, yeah, well, sort of. Simi replaces it, but it replaces it for one part of the task of going from dev to production, like repeatedly. There's a built-in configuration management system. So the way that Entityform works, it should be completely compatible with that, so that you wouldn't need anything else in order to make it work with that.
So I know you told me this, but I've forgotten. Like for example, development releases version 8.x, blah blah blah. We got 2 download links. The date. Is that the compile date for the zip and tar?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's why I know they're not doing a lot of work on it. So they probably did some initial sort of testing and then probably haven't done anything in a while, which is not surprising. Some of my modules look like that too, because they're changing so much in Drupal 8 core that if you port your modules, then you're having to report them again. I've already ported one of the modules 2 or 3 times, and so I'm not doing it again until I see a release candidate. So that's probably, I can imagine that might be in a similar situation for the guy or the people who are doing this.
Maybe he might close to not requiring the block 5 module at all.
Yeah. It's funny we're in betas, and I still feel like there's a little bit of API shift. Like it's not bad now, but
Oh yeah, for sure. That's why I'm not doing. They're definitely still. If you look at the list of open issues for Drupal 8, you're not going to want to build, because I recently redid my personal site, and I was holding out for 8, and I was just I can't wait any longer. I need to update this, and so and I looked at 8, and I was when I saw the issues that are open, knowing I'm going to have to update and figure out some way to deal with that, I was like,
just within the last week or two, I was looking at the admin menu module, and it's still tied to a number of function calls that have been removed from D8.
Yeah.
So if you install a recent D8 beta, the admin menu.
well, the other big problem is I think that they don't have any. There was some discussion about bringing this back, but as far as I know, there's no beta to beta upgrade path. So if you have beta 3, you're not guaranteed an upgrade path to beta 4, et cetera, up.
Head-to-head module being viable.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Yeah. So with all that, that's why I was I'm just waiting for a release candidate until I really. I mean, I've done some preliminary work personally for some of my modules just so I know the general landscape and some of the things that I'm going to have to learn. I've got kind of the basics down, I guess I would say, but some of the implementation details are still shifting, so I don't want to do a ton. Particularly, well, the one I was working on was menu badges, and the menu system has shifted at least 2 or 3 times. So, because I think menu items are now entities. So that's one thing, actually. There's even more things that are entities in Drupal 8. So things like entity reference and stuff should be which you can easily do when you're using Entityform. That should make it even more.
Expensive.
You should do a much. You should have even more power with a module like this.
I have been thinking of recreating something that existed some time back. It was called volunteer time slots. It was a way of having sign-up sheets with some half-hour interval, hour, or something like that. Do you think that this would be a way to go about that?
So the issue is that you're going to have to figure out how to. I don't know what that module did exactly because I didn't ever use it, but how to keep. I don't know if it needs to like show when time slots are filled.
Yes.
So that would probably require you could allow people to submit some sort of request, but the ability to show what time slots are filled might be a little bit tricky. I guess if you want to do it really simplistically, you could create a view and like sort of show and put it in a block and put it on the same page as the form. People could like, look at the ones that are filled and then do it. It's just when they sign up, the form, doing some kind of validation is probably going to require custom code to like just check to see if somebody already signed up for this. Entityform's not going to give you, well, maybe could you do it with rules?
With the entity reference, instead of the simple selector, you just change it to calculate the allowed values from a view, and then.
Oh yeah, that would work. That would work. Yeah. So there's an option. I don't have time to go through it all probably, but there is an option.
You'd probably want to do something else, like in conjunction with taxonomy or something, to find everything that's been tagged.
Yeah, on an entity reference. We did the simple selector, but there is an option where you can say the available values should be the result of this other view. So the question is, can you create a view that shows the available values? But if you can create a view that shows the available values, then you could use this entity selection by view option. So it might be possible. It might be tricky to show the available values because those are the ones that haven't been actually selected. That means you're going to have like, well, I guess you're going to have that anyway. You're going to have some kind of time slot entity.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, which you can do. You can do it as a node. You can also get the entity construction kit, the ECK module. It allows you to build entities if you don't want to fill up your content listing with a bunch of different nodes for every time slot for everything or whatever. You could use something like that too. But
so I was thinking something even more basic, taxonomy, vocabulary, hours of day 0 through 23. For example, and then you can do an aggregation on the view. Only pick ones that have tagged count is 0.
yeah, that would probably work. Yeah.
No. The
Something.
trick is going to be getting the day, what day
Yeah.
something is tagged.
Yeah, that's where.
View context, which you'd probably have to do in code because.
Yeah, because that's the other issue is if you have that date selector and then and then you're going to come down like it's not unless you have some JavaScript like you're going to be selecting the date at the top and it's not going to know that at the bottom because you haven't submitted the form yet.
If you made an ECK entity with all the slots, and then you had a rule that, so if you put it into.
You could definitely do it with if you were willing to let people submit it and then get an error if the slot was filled. I'm sure you could do it. If they could pick one and it might, which I understand is not necessarily the best user interface, but if they could pick one and then it would just say, oh, sorry, that one's full, which I said, you could easily put a listing of the ones that have been taken. So if you had that tied next to the other one, it might not be so bad.
Just rules. You don't need anything else but rules.
Yeah, there's actually, I didn't show it, but there's, you can use, there is, where is it? Under the rules here. There are validation rules. I showed only the submission form rules, but there's actually a bunch more you can use with the same system here. You can do form access rules, like who's allowed to view the form. You can use rules to determine that. And then you can do validation here. So you could throw out errors by doing some kind of validation with this as well.
For what it's worth, anybody that's trying to look at entity reference views as a limiter for the picker, if it works for your use case, great. If it doesn't, it's a pain in the ass. So don't be surprised if it doesn't work for your use case.